Hey YouTube, in this video I'm talking about how to train to be able to master the 100 and the 200 simultaneously, so you're able to do doubles every single time you go to compete. Maybe you're not going to win, but at the very least, every single time you compete and you do the 100 and the 200, you're able to achieve a balance where the 200 is either slightly more or slightly less than your 100-meter PB if you divide it by 2. There's an exact number for what it'd be. There's a way to check whether you're a 200-meter dominant sprinter, which is if you was to divide your 200-meter time by your 100-meter time, you get something like 1.994. And if you're more 100-meter dominant than 200, your 200-meter time is going to be something like 2.0 something 4, I think. But if you're doing doubles, because this is where we try and actually master the 100, if you're actually trying to actively go to a single meet and run 100 and run 200 and run them well, even if you were 200 dominant, most likely your meet's going to start with the 100 meter. Actually, I think every meet starts with the 100 meter first, and then the 200 will come afterwards. And because the 100 meter would have tired you out, an all-out effort, a competition all-out effort, the 200 meters most likely going to be slower. So unless you bought your 100 meters, there's basically no chance of you ever getting a time that's going to make it so that you're more 200 meter dominant than you are 100 meter dominant. But if we're trying to master the 1 and the 2, so we're able to essentially place where we would with the 100 with the 2 and vice versa, then we need to understand how we're going to be training to achieve this. And the correct way is to understand that the 200 is only an extension of the 100. Very different from the 400. The 400 is a bit more, not just technically based, but it's more race plan. You need to have an actual race plan. For the 100, there isn't much need for a race plan, but if you get good enough to be able to implement a race plan, you're going to be able to run faster. And for the 200, you do need a race plan, but the race plan isn't too complex. I've made videos, separate videos, where I've gone over the race plans you'd want for the 100 and the 200. I'm gonna leave them linked in the description. But to train for them is very different from racing with them and trying to get a race plan and stuff. The way you need to train for them is speed, pure speed. To improve your 100 meter time, you need pure speed. To improve your 200 meter time, you need pure speed. There is no other way around it. People like to think, okay, so 100 meters obviously is basically just speed. It's as close you can get to speed other than the 60 meters. So it's in and outdoors, this is the closest you're going to get to speed. But what about the 200? The 200 is a longer event. You're also going around a bend. You're most likely not going to hit your top speed. That couldn't be anything further from the truth. You'll be hitting your top speed. The aim here though is to hold your top speed for longer than 100 meters for double the amount of time. And that's where the race plan will start to come in. But at the end of the day, you're holding your top speed for longer, or at least you're trying to, which means more of the 200 meters is deceleration time, essentially. Which means to be able to beat your competition, you're going to need to have a higher top speed than them, for one, and you're going to have to decelerate slower than them, for two. How do you achieve both of these? Well, first of all, max velocity training. You're going to need to train for max velocity. I have a video on that where I talk about how to get faster, and I basically lay out a block that you want to be doing for this entirety of the time you're trying to run the 100 and 200, which is max velocity and form. Max velocity will get you faster and will just make you get to the peak of what your current form will allow you to get. And form training will allow you to improve your form so that you have more potential to get faster, essentially. And along with that, this is essentially what you're going to be doing for the entirety of the season. And you're also going to be doing a bunch of other stuff like mobility, work in a gym, and all this other stuff. I always have videos for those, but I'm not going to link these because there'd be too many to go through. But this is how the majority of your training would look like. Max velocity and form, nothing else. September, October, November, December, January, February, March, maybe even April. And by the time you get around April, this is where you want to start to include speed endurance if you wasn't already. I would recommend don't include speed endurance up until this point, because speed endurance is just you learning how to maintain your form for longer periods of time. And if you're improving your form, most likely you've gotten faster. So even if you had massive form breakdown, you're not going to be too slow in a 200, because you could literally only train for the 100 improve your form for the 100, improve your max velocity for the 100, and PB the 200. It's just that simple. But if you want to be dominant in the 200, then the way you'd have to do it is include speed endurance. And speed endurance isn't where you're just doing a bunch of like 150 repeats and then trying to hold on. No, this is where you actually understand what you're trying to do, which is if you're doing 150 repeats, then it's maintaining your form for the entirety of the 150. This might mean you're not running all out. This might mean you don't feel like you're running fast. This might mean you're not even running fast. But the goal here is to maintain your form. Once you've figured out how to maintain your form, now you can start to make the movement faster and faster and faster and faster. Because with the way you'd be training, unless you was mainly a 200-meter sprinter before, you don't know how to sprint off a curve, which means, or at the very least, you know how to sprint off a curve efficiently, which means there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And the easiest way to get faster without doing all of that work, you are going to have to do it eventually, but without having to go out of your way to do all of that work, and just learn it naturally, is to maintain your form and just focus on that. That's what true speed endurance is. And as you do that, your body's going to become more efficient, be able to maintain its form for longer. And the longer you're able to maintain your form, the faster, not just the faster your top speed will be, the longer you're able to hold it and the slower you're going to be able to decelerate for. And as you continue to do 200-meter competitions, your body's going to realize, oh, okay, if I just stay over here, I'm going to be the most efficient when I'm sprinting. And I just stay here, and then we'll just find out some other things as well. But there are other trainings you can do. With speed endurance, you can also train yourself how to run off curves because it's longer than 100. It's not straight anymore. So you can also work on maintaining your form whilst also incorporating other things into your training that would allow you to be able to run a curve faster. For example, again, a bunch of wickets. A bunch of cones around the bend, right in the middle. So this is how wide the bend is, for example. You get cones here, so you only be able to run within this range. So you try and teach your body to stay in the curve so you can stay inside and try and slingshot off the bend. Stuff like that, you can start to incorporate those. But when you're doing speed endurance, it's important you start to do it late. Don't do speed endurance early in your season, because what's the point in enduring speeds if the speeds are slow or if the speeds aren't as fast as you could be? Because speed endurance training could allow you to peak early in the sense where you've trained yourself to hold this level of speed. And what we want our body to feel uncomfortable with the speed, but because of the form. And we want our body to be able to withstand the form slightly, because we don't want our body to get used to it. Because if our body gets used to it, that could result in our body locking in this speed that we have. So if we PB, that might be the last PB we get for the rest of the season, which is something we do not want. So we want our speed endurance training to happen as late as possible. And we also want to make sure that our speed endurance training doesn't interfere with our max velocity and our form. I don't care whether this is September or October or August, of the next year. Max velocity and form training must stay the same. If you're going to do this block, make sure that 3 days of max velocity doesn't change and that 1 day of form training doesn't change, minimum. And then from there, if you're going to include speed endurance, which in this case would be the goal, you want to make sure that the speed endurance is added as an extra day. So if you're only doing 2 days of training, this is where that third day of training would finally come into fruition. You'd be able to use it. So for example, Monday, Wednesday, max velocities, or maybe max velocity and form, and Friday is where you're going to do your speed endurance. You don't need multiple days to do your speed endurance every week. You might just need one every week. That would literally be enough. Maybe 2 every now and then for a week. But that's at most all you're going to do, because the main thing is just teaching your body how to use its form. You're not trying to chase lactate thresholds improvements, because that is not necessary. You don't need to get faster by feeling lactate. In fact, if you feel lactate for 100, 200 or 400, most likely, not even most likely, you are running the event wrong. Especially for 100, you should be able to run a whole 100 without feeling lactate build up once. For 200, you should be able to run that whole thing without feeling lactate. If anything, you should feel like the line is further away than it really is. And for 400, whilst it is very difficult, it is possible to run it without feeling lactate build up once. Which is why we don't want to be doing speed endurance whilst we're trying to chase lactate. Generally, our speed endurance training sessions wouldn't be anything longer than 250 meters. And to be honest, you don't even need to go beyond 200 meters. Why would you train? I mean, yeah, training for an extra distance would allow you to improve, But if you're training for 200, there's not much point in doing a 250 or a 300 unless during your season at some point you plan to do a 300 or you plan to do 400, because the event you're doing is 200. So whilst 250s can benefit you, how much? Because you're going to have to learn how to sustain your speed for longer, and you're building up your speed, which this is why it's so important. You're building your max velocity most likely from the 150 mark beyond the finish line, which is a straight, which will allow you to build up your acceleration really, really easily. But what we're trying to learn is how to build our acceleration around that bend and then continue trying to get there, hold it, have to handle the bend, and then push on for the rest of the 200 or whatever, the rest of the 80 meters. So if you don't do 250s, I would recommend you start at the 200 meter mark and you end it 50 meters beyond the finish line, because that's just the smartest way to do it. What's the point in being able to do longer distance, be able to hold your form for longer, if the way you're trained to hold your form won't be able to cross over as well to 200? And as long as you do that, you're going to end up building a very strong foundation for when you go to actually compete for the 1 and the 2, because you're going to have a higher top speed and you're going to be able to hold your form that's improved throughout the season for longer, so that this higher top speed is able to transfer over to the 200. Because you have better stamina and you have a higher speed, how could you not get faster? PBing would just not make sense. And after all of that, you're going to start to feel comfortable and you're going to be ready to dominate in the 1 and the 2. And there's other ways to ensure that you're able to improve. One of these is time trials. I've already made a video on that. Post that link in the description. And the reason why time trials are important here is because with time trials, they happen too late for you to be able to make a big change, but you know this is the most accurate example of what would happen in a race. It's a mock race. You get to see what's going to happen. And it's a get out of jail free card, because with the time trial, what essentially happens is you pick whichever one you think you're the worst at. Do you think you're the worst at 100 or do you think you're worst at 200? You only pick one, that's it. You're not allowed to do multiple time trials. Whilst you can, the benefits wane, because if you mess up the 1 and the 2, you're going to end up thinking about the mess up as you get to your race, because one of them time trials will happen earlier, and then that one time trial mess up might affect your next time trial mess up, which means you didn't need to make a mistake, but you did anyway, and then you're going to go into your race feeling a bit worn out. So I generally like to have my time trials 2 days before a race. So you pick one. If you're the worst at the 200, you're like, okay, you set up 200, and I've already made a complete video on exactly how you do the time trial, and you do that, and then you come back, you get feedback, and you're like, okay, that one thing you're going to bring into the race, you know what you're going to bring in to make sure that the time trial, if it was botched, does not end up like that. Your competition does not end up like that time trial a few days ago. So you're able to be at your best because you're able to bring in the most valuable and the most resourceful information. That one thing you're able to bring onto a race with you when the gun goes into the competition, so you're able to perform your best. As long as you do all of that, by the end of the season, the only way is up. For the 100 and the 200, you're going to be your best possible self for both of these distances as you compete. If you like my video, like the video, let me know in the comment section below. Check the description, because anything I forget to say in the video, I always put in the description. And if you like my content, subscribe. Helps the channel out a lot. I post every 2 days at 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. If you don't know when that is, just hit the bell and then you'll be notified instantly.